Okay. Good evening. We are starting the December 14, 2020 Lower Makefield Township Planning Commission meeting. All members are present, and our first order of business is the approval of our minutes from our November 30th meeting. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Anyone have any comments, corrections, changes to the minutes?
Nope.
Seeing none, someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll call a question. All in favor of approval of the November 30, 2020 minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
I think I got everybody. Some of you are muted. Dawn,
Sorry.
was that a no? Oh, that was okay.
Sorry about that. Aye, yes.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is a continuation of what was discussed at our last meeting concerning commenting on the Morrisville Borough Comprehensive Master Plan. Since our last meeting, Barbara had circulated what she had put together based upon our comments, which is really a combination of substantive comments for Morrisville, as well as comments or things we wanted to bring to the attention of our own Board of Supervisors. I think at our last meeting, and Jim, and this is reflected in the minutes, you said normally we would just send a letter, the Planning Commission would just send a letter to Morrisville. Is that I thought I saw that in the minutes, and I recall you having said that. And this pushes everything together. I don't really feel strongly about it one way or another, but should we be separating this out with our comments to Morrisville on the one hand, and on the other hand, our comments to the Board of Supervisors in our own town?
That's one of those things you could do either way. You could either have one memo to forward to Morrisville Borough for their planning commission and their borough council to consider while they do their comprehensive plan, or we could just forward it to the board and the Board of Supervisors if they so choose and wish to just forward their comments on.
Okay, I mean, substantively, there's no difference. So I mean, as long as there's no time in terms of getting it to Morrisville, the other members of the board will comment, but I don't really have a strong preference about that. So I guess why don't we start off? Do other members of the board have comments about the substance that Barbara summarized that we talked about last meeting?
I only have one comment, which is just in clarification of number 2, the boat launch, the promote awareness. That was with regards to, if I recall correctly from the minutes and from my memory of the meeting, it was that there's no signage at all to note exactly what the boat launch is. Is that what that's referring to, right?
Maybe we should make it more clear, because I think there is no signage there at all.
Right. And so just, I don't want there to promote awareness. Only my understanding was promote awareness within the general vicinity of the boat launch itself, not a broader request to promote awareness about the existence of the boat launch to the broader community. And I'm not sure if that should be.
What I did is I just copied numbers 1 through 9 as set forth in the original letter we received last time to review it. And the second page were the comments that I provided as to what should be included.
Okay.
Yeah, the page 1, number 2 is just, I think Morrisville is trying to use the boat launch to promote that river walk.
Right.
And
okay.
Yeah. So the second page is just us saying they just have to have good signage to make sure it's clear who can use it and what it is and what it's to be used for.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying. I'm good.
Anybody else have any substantive comments about this?
So, like, and from my perspective, the one comment we had to the Board of Supervisors, I think it's perfectly constructive to leave that on whatever we send to Morrisville, just letting them know that somebody in Lower Makefield at least highlighted it, and they might hear about it in the future from Parks and Rec.
Okay.
Barb, does the township have any say in what goes on with that boat launch?
No.
Or is, as part of the authority, municipal authority, it's like a separate entity, and that land is not under our zoning?
Well, they don't have that boat launch listed as being, well, it is the municipal authority, but we can provide comments and suggestions. We can't enforce anything if they don't do it, but at least it's on record. So if anybody comes back to us and says, well, it's really hard, we can't get to the boat launch, I don't know, there's no signage, we can say, well, we did tell them.
And if I may, we actually do have some control over this. Right now, it's sort of an informal place where people put their boat in. If they want to go ahead and expand that and build structures and add parking and items like that, then it would come under Lower Makefield's jurisdiction to provide input.
Why? Because we'd be adjacent to the proposed expansion area, or?
No, it's in Lower Makefield.
Oh, the boat launch is in Lower Makefield.
It is in Lower Makefield.
Oh.
Yeah, I was just saying, since it's the property of the municipal authority, can the township dictate what goes on as far as land use?
Yes.
We can, as to use, right?
Correct.
So it would be important. It would be, I think, important for the planning commission, then, I could be, I'm just stating an opinion, as liaison, that if there is if this is something the township should deal with, that the borough should understand it, that this boat ramp will have to, any changes to the boat ramp will have to be, considered with the land use, ordinances of the township. Just saying, I could be off base.
But I think that makes sense, but I think we have to look at what exists. Right now, it is a boat launch. It's already there. The entire time I've lived in Lower Makefield, which is 25 years, it's been a boat launch. And so we'd have a hard time changing the use of it now. I think having signage there would be real important, because right now it's sort of, people can't really tell what it is. You see some boats there periodically, but it's unclear whether it's open to the public, not open to the public. People just park their cars there sometimes. I mean, things like signage only help us. If they wanted to really expand it, I think it might be, Lower Makefield might have an issue with it. But as to its present use, if all they were going to do was to put signage there, where maybe more delineate parking or whatever they're doing, I don't think we'd have much of a leg to stand on to restrict any of that, since it's been a pre-existing use for decades.
But we can address Fred's comment. I can add a sentence that says, any modifications that result in change of use or the nature of the use need to comply with Lower Makefield Township's ordinances.
What do you mean by the nature of the use, though? I mean,
what if they expand the boat launch to hold like a mini dock for 4 or 5 boats?
So you're talking about a changed use.
Yeah.
I mean, if the use stays the same, we don't have any.
No.
There's nothing to do.
This isn't the use isn't restricted to just Morrisville residents, is it?
We don't know.
Oh.
Well, I interpreted what I read last time as it's something in Lower Makefield, but Morrisville residents have right of use to it.
Just Morrisville residents?
No, but I don't. Maybe they're just. I took it as them saying, even though it's in Lower Makefield, their residents are still permitted to use it. we can't restrict it to only Lower Makefield residents for that particular use,
But
that location.
but I'm not clear, does Lower Makefield residents have the right to use it too? Since it's owned by the Morrisville Municipal Authority?
We don't know.
Well, right now, it looks like it's open to anybody.
Yeah.
That's what it looks
There's
like.
no restrictions. There's no signage that restricts the use. So, my question is, if Morrisville wants to promote the use, that's great. But if that means that there's a need to change the physical location of, the dimensions of the launch, that they have to understand that the township, through its ordinances, may have something to say. That's all. I mean, I don't even, I'm no lawyer, so I'm just, you're dealing with three different entities now. You're dealing with the municipal authority, you're dealing with Morrisville Borough, and you're dealing with the Lower Makefield Township. So
Technically, to your comment, Fred, if, say, Morrisville Municipal Authority does something that changes the dimensions of the boat launch that do not comply with our zoning ordinance, they technically will get slapped with a notice of violation and expected to comply, because we have the right to enforce our ordinances as to that usage there.
And the other issue with that site is there's really no place to expand parking. If that's what someone's thinking about, there's really not a lot of room there. It's a narrow road, so there's no street parking, and it doesn't look like, unless they were to clear cut a lot of trees, which I don't even know if that's part of their property, there'd be no place to put parking.
I mean, I think back to Barbara's original suggestion, it probably would make sense to just put a general statement in there saying any changes, updates, improvements need to follow the Lower Makefield planning and zoning processes, and follow our codes and regulations.
That makes sense.
I agree.
Yep,
Jim,
got it.
sorry, Barbara.
I was going to say, I'm just going to put in any modifications, changes, or additions to boat launch should comply with township ordinances. So,
Jim, I was just going to ask you, as a kind of a aside, apart from this parcel that's owned by the Morrisville Municipal Authority, are there other towns or authorities like that have property in Lower Makefield?
The water company owns several parcels. There's a parcel also owned by the Sunoco Oil Company. They have an oil pipeline that runs to the northern part of the township. Transcontinental has a piece of property off of Lindenhurst Road that they own, and they have a right-of-way that runs through the township.
Okay, thanks.
How about the Joint Toll Commission? Does that have?
And the Joint Toll Bridge Commission. Thank you.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Any other substantive comments about the recommendations or comments that we made? Okay. Do we need to make a motion about this, Jim, or?
It doesn't hurt just to say, make a motion to forward the comments as discussed.
and who are we forwarding them to? Is it staying as we're submitting it to the supervisors from us, or you want it separated into two separate letters?
I'm fine with it as it is, but how does everybody else feel about it?
I'd like to know your thoughts, Fred.
I gave the board my report 2 weeks ago saying that the planning commission is going to reply as far as recommendations, if any, to Morrisville, and that if any members of the board wish to participate, since that's how it sounded like you were going 2 weeks ago, that they would come and participate tonight. However, and the public could participate tonight as their right to do so. But as far as what you want to do, if you want to bring it before the board on Wednesday, you can do that too. I no problem.
I think given what you said at the last Board of Supervisors meeting, I think it kind of makes sense to just send this over to Morrisville, unless there's somebody waiting to comment in public comment right now.
Do we need to send it also to Parks and Recs? There was a portion on there, I know, on the bottom that discussed Parks and Rec. Do we need to send it to them separately, or that's just something that's just going to kind of comment for the future?
Well, I'll send it to Mars. I'll label it to Morrisville, I guess, Planning Commission, and I'll copy the Township Board of Supervisors and the Township Manager, and then they can internally decide how they want to distribute it to other committee people in the township.
Exactly.
And our Parks Department and our director are already aware of Morrisville Borough and the issue with the Little League and the potential loss of fields. So they've reached out to Monica to start discussions.
Okay. Does someone want to make a motion at this point?
I'll make a motion to send the letter that Barbara drafted to us with the changes discussed tonight directly to Morrisville Borough with a copy to the Board of Supervisors and to the Township Manager.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Before we take a vote, is there any public comment? Anyone waiting for public comment?
There's no public comment.
Okay. We'll call the question at this point. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I think everyone said yes, right?
Yes.
Okay. I heard them at the same time, so I wasn't sure. Okay, so the motion passes. Jim, I guess our next item on the agenda, you had mentioned you had miscellaneous ordinance amendments that you wanted to bring to our attention.
Yes, we've been looking at our ordinances for the last several years. We did make a bunch of changes to the ordinance to try to prevent people from having to go to the zoning hearing board. However, as I've been going through, there's more items that I'd just like to bring to your attention and just to start to consider. If you like, I'll share my screen and I can show you which ones I'm talking about. Primarily dealing with fences and pools. Right now we have and sheds. Right now we have Chapter 200-69 accessory uses, and particularly residential accessory buildings. Right now we have a requirement that residential accessory buildings, which would include sheds, detached garages, etc., shall be located only in the fourth of the lot furthest removed from the road, and that they have to be a minimum of 10 feet from any side or rear lot lines. As I've been going through the town, I've noticed that we literally have hundreds and hundreds of sheds and other buildings that do not comply with these requirements. Most people, when they put their shed in, put it close to the property line, typically within a couple of feet from the rear and side property line. A lot of sheds also people put behind the house at the end of their driveway. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on whether we should change that since we have so many non-complying properties. I mean, literally, maybe even thousands in our township. Get your thoughts on whether we should reduce the setback requirements for accessory buildings and whether we should just change that fourth of the lot furthest removed from abutting streets. Maybe put it to be behind the rear of the home. Do
you have an idea how many, the percentage of people that apply for appropriate zoning or permitting when they put in a shed, as opposed to those who don't?
I don't have a real good sense of that because a lot of people have had sheds for years done without permits. But I'd say probably 3 out of 4 people get permits, and the other fourth don't. And a lot of times when they put them in, they just don't put them where they're supposed to. They're supposed to be 10 foot off the property line, but then when they get out there, they just move it a little bit closer because it just makes sense. And some of these might go back like 30, 40 years.
Yeah. Hey, Jim, having just gone through this, is it something we think that really needs to be changed, or do we just need to somehow make sure people are aware of it better? Because it's not a hard process, as I found out a couple months ago. It's pretty straightforward.
I know I've looked at other towns, and most other towns don't even have a setback requirement for a shed. They basically, you could put it right up on the property line. A few have a 3-foot offset requirement. Years ago, when they first did zoning in Lower Makefield 60 years ago, they made it a 3-foot setback from a property line.
So just to clarify, do you think in that quarter that doesn't get it, to Adrian's point of if it's fairly straightforward to get it, do you think it's a combination of lack of education or knowledge about it, a lack of wanting to go through the permit process, and are there tax implications when a shed is built that will cause property taxes to go up? And therefore, I assume it might be some element of tax avoidance in order to not formalize the process. Are those the 3 categories that you think people fall into when not complying with this ordinance?
I'm not sure if the Board of Assessment adds to the assessment of the property just for a shed.
Okay.
If it was a garage, they would definitely do that. And a garage is more impactful than something that would normally be caught. Versus a shed, typically it's smaller. Most neighbors wouldn't even notice it. When we're driving around the town, we hardly ever notice it either unless it's drawn to our attention by a neighbor complaining. And then the issue is when you have a small lot, if your lot's 100 feet wide by 150 foot deep, and you put the shed 10 foot off of each side and rear property line, as some people say, it looks like the shed's in the middle of the lot. And it's not really, it's just something that there's so many non-compliant ones that no one ever complains about because it's not abnormal to have a shed near the property line.
Can I say something? I would at least make some sort of requirement that this shed has to be located so many feet off the property line, because I've seen lots of problems with property owners, especially with fences, where people say, well, their fence is on my property and there's no survey done. So if you require the shed or the straw or whatever it is to be at least 2 or 3 feet off the property line, at least you're putting some sort of buffer to help prevent somebody placing a shed on their neighbor's property, actually.
That makes sense.
Yeah. And it just seems to me like, there are I remember a long time ago, I put a fence up and I crossed I had to cross the property line to tie into a neighbor's fence rather than put 2 parallel fences 3 feet apart from each other. There's a process to do things and get approval, like I got a letter from my neighbor, said it was okay. And the township was good with it and they approved it. And some of the neighborhoods we have here, the lots are, when you start looking at 1/4 acre, 1/3 acre lots, and you're like put a shed right at the property line, I think it's a good thing for the township. If for nothing else, if somebody wants to put it right on the property line, there has to be some sort of discussion and notification process before they do that with the neighbors, because that could be right on top of somebody's house.
I agree. I view this ordinance as a protection for the neighbors to have a cause of action to say you did not comply. And the fact that there's so many non-compliant sheds, but you're not hearing it from neighboring property owners doesn't bring me a lot of concern about those that are in existence, but I'd like to protect the rights of the neighbors of the violating shed owner to have a mechanism to bring a complaint or to point to a reason why that shed should not border that property down to the last inch.
And this is something that you don't necessarily have to make a decision tonight. I just wanted to bring a couple of these items to everyone's attention to think about a little bit so that later we can have a better formulation of how we want to change it or whether we want to change it at all.
Just something for consideration as well. I've seen in other municipalities where they define the size of the accessory building. So you don't have a monster-sized accessory building / shed 3 feet off the property line. It would be something of a reasonable size. So
Yeah. I've seen them where they've defined it to be no more than 25% of the size of the principal structure or something to that effect.
That's pretty big.
Yeah, that seems. Aren't they usually 8 by 8 or 10 by 10 or something like that?
10
Usually, but we have a lot of very large ones in this town too. So I think that idea of a limitation is a good one too.
How does this information get disseminated to property owners?
Well, most people who install sheds or do work on a property, contractors are supposed to know that they need to comply with our requirements. I think the most common one where people are non-compliant are when someone just goes to Home Depot, says, deliver a shed for me, I'll put it in. So the homeowner just never even thinks about it. And that's something for a topic for our newsletter and our Facebook page, just to let people know what they need to get permits for and what some of the requirements are. Sheds and fences are two of the most common permits that we do get.
Any other comments on this ordinance? Jim, you have other ordinances you wanted to bring up?
Yes, 200-69-14C, fences and walls. We made some changes to that a couple of years ago to better address the issue of lots that have dual frontages, or actually a corner lot that has 2 front yards, to give some relief. And once again, that was another one where we have a lot of properties that were in violation and or the interpretation of the town that allowed them to put a fence where the ordinance didn't allow was inconsistent. So we made some of those changes, and we also changed to say that a fence and a buffer easement was acceptable, especially since a couple of our buffers contemplate putting a fence up in addition to landscaping. But we left in the requirement that you can't have a fence within an easement. Now, it's a common thing where whenever someone wants to go put a fence in an easement, they go to our zoning hearing board, and the relief is granted in almost every case, subject to a couple of conditions. One, that access is maintained through the use of gates so that whoever owns the easement can get through, that it doesn't block the flow of water in the case of a drainage easement. And many other towns don't regulate fences and easements. Basically, if you want to put a fence in an easement, you need permission from whoever is the easement holder. I would like to just strike this provision, and then we handle this as part of the building permit. If someone wants to put a fence within an easement, they need to have written permission from whoever owns that, whether it's the township through a drainage easement, sewer authority, water company, Transco, gas pipeline, any of those.
So in other words, you're saying you would not accept a permit application unless that written letter was included?
Correct.
Okay.
That makes sense to me. And I'm assuming you guys would know if an application came in and there was an easement that they were crossing, but the resident did not.
Yes, well, we typically do. We require that they have a survey, and we often check just to make sure that they've done it properly. Some people, they put together a little, I would say, crappy sketch that shows the property, but they're not aware that they have easements.
Yep.
This is just one of those. It's just a nuisance for the zoning hearing board. They just routinely grant it because they don't see any problem with the fence and the easement, provided the couple of safeguards are added that are just common sense.
I totally agree with the approach. We just need to make sure that there's a backstop because a lot of people don't know. And so there's a backstop, I guess, in your office that would let them know if, like, okay, you need to get a letter, so they need to know they need to go back, or, you know, it doesn't get missed. That's all.
Yeah, we're updating our guidelines right now for all permits because they really were done in the 1980s, 1990s, and they're unclear and difficult for people to figure out what they need for each permit. And I'm looking to simplify this by the end of the year. And one of the things will be that you have to have a survey of the property if you need one. The township has surveys for many properties, and that if you contact us, we could send it in. And actually, most of the fence companies now, when they go to do a fence, they ask the homeowner if they have an actual survey of the property. If they don't, then they contact us. We've scanned a number of properties, that we've scanned over 30,000 permits. We're able to provide surveys when they are available.
So Jim, under current practice, somebody goes to the zoning hearing board, they get their relief. Is the holder of the easement ever contacted about permission right now, or is that just not even an issue?
Now, they'd have to be contacted as part of the notification for the zoning relief.
So they're already doing. So the point is, they're already going to the holder of the easement right now and someone's getting permission from that party.
Yes, they are required to get permission.
Okay, so this seems like a no-brainer then to cut out the zoning hearing board from this process.
And I think they would agree.
You'd still be providing for access, requiring access, correct?
Yes. Now, the next item that's been of a concern is above ground swimming pools. We have a requirement for an above ground swimming pool that they have a deck or walkway at least 2 feet in width measured from the exterior edge of the pool. Now, I know, like, back in the old days when people had their above ground pool, a lot of them came with a little decking around the edge that you'd sit on the edge of the pool. However, that's not a requirement of the International Pool and Spa Code to have anything like that. And a lot of above ground pools that people get installed, they basically just have the pool and they have a ladder to get in the pool. And that ladder has to have all of the requirements necessary so that it's secure and can't be, a kid can't climb up the ladder and into it. It has to be locked properly. And I know my preference is just to change the requirement for above ground pools, just to be that the pools shall comply with the requirements for the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code, same as with an in-ground pool, and that we follow the requirements of that as they do in every other municipality.
Was there any safety reason why they had that in there?
No. As with the in-ground pools, back in the 1980s, I believe it is, they were looking at updating the pool ordinance. And I think there had been a drowning somewhere in the township. They were very concerned about it. So the recommendation to the Planning Commission was just to make sure that they complied with all current safety requirements. And then they wrote the ordinance and ignored all the safety requirements that were in place and just said, let's arbitrarily put up a higher fence, thinking that that would make it safer, when that doesn't necessarily make it safer. I mean, a pool's safe up to a certain height, and that's what's common nationally. And provided that they have all of the safety measures in place. Now for in-ground pools, you have alarms on doors and on walls. You have the height of the latch has to be a certain height. The height of the fence has to be a minimum certain height. Same with above ground pools. They have a similar thing with the locking ladder so that a kid can't get up and in the ladder when you're not in use.
So do the above ground pools have to require a fence also around it? Is that what I'm reading in number 2 there, or that's just if they decide to put a fence in?
Well, an above ground pool, it depends on how high the above ground pool is. I think if the height of the pool is greater than 4 feet, then it meets the pool requirement for a pool barrier. Then the only other thing is the gate. So, or you could just put a fence up around the pool if your pool is less than a 4 foot high above ground pool. Problem I see with this mainly is just the inconsistency with the national standards for pool safety and inconsistency with what is done in every other township that surrounds us.
Well, it would seem like there's no reason not to require the safety measures in place.
And then the last item I have are pools of restricted size or hot tubs. Currently, we have a requirement that the hot tub be located within the house, or if it's outside of the house, it has to be located within an enclosed patio. And it has to be up against the rear wall of the house and have a fence around it with a height of 5 feet. And it's just sort of an odd way to go about it. I'm not sure what they were thinking when they made this rule years ago. But, you know, as I'm sure most of you are aware, when you have a hot tub, most of them now come with a locking cover. Or you'd put a fence around it, and the fence would have to meet the barrier requirements of the International Pool and Spa Code. So having it within an enclosed patio, I'm not sure what the thought was, to have it hidden from the neighbors, or I'm not really sure what the thought was.
I think that the thought was, if you don't put your cover on it, somebody could still walk through your yard and get into it.
Mm.
I'm sure it's defined somewhere, but what do they mean by an enclosed patio anyway?
It's not defined anywhere.
So it's completely meaningless.
It's confusingness is more like it. And then once again, they have a fence of a 5 foot height when all the pool codes require a 4 foot high barrier, fence or wall or whatever it is that's not climbable. In addition to having latch for the gate to get in, being at a higher location so a kid can't just reach up and open the gate. and that if it's up against the house, you need the proper pool alarms for doors and windows.
Are hot tubs regulated like pools are under that international code?
Yes.
So it would make sense to make them subject to the same type of regulations as you were suggesting with the pools.
I would say so. And what I can do is, before we discuss this again, I'll give everyone what the exact requirements are for the pool and spa code, so you can actually see what they are compared to what they are now and make a better informed decision on whether you feel any changes are appropriate.
And it might make it easier because this says pools of restrictive size. So what's the restrictive size? If they all follow the international code, it'll be probably easier than trying to define a pool of a restrictive size too.
And they actually call those spas.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so those are just a couple of items that I just wanted to bring to your attention to consider, and then we can discuss that at a later time.
Okay, well, thank you for that preview of what's to come. Thank you. And I think this was a good way of presenting it to us because it at least gets us thinking about it so that when it actually does come before us, we're ready to have a good conversation about it. I don't think there's anything else on our agenda. Does anybody else have any other business?
I believe you all got notified that we have the revised plans in for Prickett Preserve.
Yes.
So if anyone would like a reduced size copy of the full set of plans, I have them on 11 by 17s. So when eventually we get all the review letters from our consultants and our volunteer committees, hold a planning commission meeting sometime in January. If you'd like to have a paper copy, just let me know and we can make it.
Thank you for letting us know that. I guess this is our last meeting of the year, so hopefully everybody has a good rest of the year as well as we can all have in these trying times, and that we all have a much better 2021 than a 2020. Anyone want to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I'll move to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. All in favor, I should say, but we're adjourned.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Yes, you as
Happy
well.
Happy holidays.
Thanks, everybody.
Holidays, everyone.